Okay, good evening, Hanukkah Sameach. I'll say a few words about the difference between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel regarding Mosif ve'olech or Pochet ve'olech. Famous machloket. Beit Shammai hold that we should be lighting 8 candles on the first day and then descending downwards as Hanukkah goes by, from 8 to 7, 7 to 6, 6 to 5, and so on, till the last day when we light only 1 candle. Beit Hillel, the way we all practice halachically, is the opposite. We add a candle each day. We start from 1, and we add a candle until we get to the 8th day with 8 candles. Rabbi Israeli Zatzal explains the difference of concepts, of views between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai coming out from this machloket. Beit Shammai, actually, they see this world as going downhill. If you just look at the parshiot we're in now, Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, we see in practice what seems to us like a downfall of the brothers of and Yosef, the sons of Yaakov. They're fighting each other. They get to hatred. They sell Yosef to the Egyptians in the end. And Yehuda is sinful in some way with Tamar. And Yosef then accuses them of being spies. And he gives them a very difficult time. And Yaakov has no idea what's going on for 22 years, missing his beloved son. If you look at reality seems very, very negative. So Beit Shammai, and by the way, the same happened by Chanukah. True, the days of the Maccabim, Jews defeated the Greeks, and they were on a high, and it was the best possible time within the years of the Second Temple. But soon after, whoever reads the history knows that soon after, there's a downfall. And everything falls apart. Shlom Tzion HaMalka and Yanai HaMelech, they kill many, many sages and important big rabbis. And then Hyrcanus and Aristobulus fight each other, a civil war within the Jewish world. And then there's Agrippas, who was a tzedaki. He wasn't even religious, as the king reigning over the Jewish people in those days. And then Hodus, who was a Roman convert, barely. So we see that many times there's a downfall if we look at the reality as is. And that's what Beit Shammai tried to express by lighting the 8 candles at first and then going downwards, ascending all the way to 1, to show how this world is somewhat pessimistic. Things don't go the way we believe should. We could add to that Beit Shammai also hold, on the other hand, that the Torah has to be kept most stringently, like all the way to the truth, ultimate truth, and not give into reality, to real life. And that expresses their view. Beit Shammai actually disconnect between the Torah and our spiritual world and the physical world. According to Beit Shammai, there's a disconnect. The physical world reality doesn't go the way we think, the way we hope it should, and many times we go downhill, and terrible things happen. On the other end, spiritually, we should be holding on to the highest level possible, disconnected from actual life many times. On the other hand, Beit Hillel are very optimistic about life. Beit Hillel view life as it may seem to us as if things are going wrong, in the wrong direction and going downhill. But truth of the matter is that behind the scenes, Hashem does all this to prepare us for a journey that will take us all the way up to the optimal situation. We see this by Yosef in Egypt and all that happened to him afterwards. We see that in the end, all that happened turned out for the good. Elokim chashava letova. In the end, Hashem led the entire development of those years to the best situation possible. He's the emperor, almost the ruler of Egypt. He saves his family. He has a reunion with his brothers and father, and a great life in the end. So it all developed in the end to be the best possible situation. So Beit Hillel view this world as Hashem directing everything to the optimal way, in the optimal way, even if it may seem to us downhill. And that's how they express, that's how they believe that we should live our spiritual life, our Torah life, connected to our physical life, not disconnected. The Torah must shine brightly our physical life, our materialistical world. And that's why their Torah is much more lenient, because it's there, it's meant to fit our life. Beit Hillel paskin and rule in a way that's very more easy to follow and more connected to life, because they feel that the Torah shines bright within our life and makes our life much more positive than we may see externally. That's why life is connected, Torah is connected to our life, Torat Chaim, and not a disconnect between spirituality and the physical world. So Bezrat Hashem, all that occurred in Hanukkah, even if afterwards, after the fact, it seemed to go downhill, we know that in the end, everything is meant for our good, and Hashem leads all that happens in this world is to lead us to the optimal, highest possible level, which brings the final redemption with all these different stages of what seem to be maybe sometimes going wrong, but they're all part of the long journey to our final redemption. So Bezrat Hashem, these should be the lights of Hanukkah, Mosif ve'olech, that no matter what, we're optimistic that the light just grows and grows, and in the end we reach our final destination, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so now Bezrat Hashem, we'll hear the shir by Reb Tzvi for approximately 20 minutes, and we, Bezrat Hashem, be inspired by his words. Bechavod.
Thank you, Steinberg. It's a tough act to follow always, but I'll try.
You can do it.
Is there I'm wondering, is it possible to allow me to share my screen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
That'll be easier. I also, if anybody's interested, I uploaded to the chat like a little bit of a source sheet. We're only going to be learning one source, but I think it's worthwhile having it in front. But I'll share it here anyways.
Okay, so that you're able to share now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And okay, can anybody see my screen? Everybody can see it? Okay, great. Okay, fantastic. So if anybody's paying attention to social media, to the politics in America, the politics, unfortunately, here in Israel, as we seem to be on the brink of another election, we know that the public discourse is ugly, to say the least. There seems to be no dialogue, just insults, and no one's listening to each other. And it just, who can make more of a drastic, gross comment about, the other group, and everyone's trying to one up the other. But I feel that specifically the Hanukkah lights can illuminate this issue for us. What I want to do, this couple of minutes that we have together, is learn a small piece from Rav Kook that has tremendously influenced my life, especially in my ability to deal with diversity, to deal with different types of opinions. Over the last 3 years, while I was working at Rutgers University, I obviously had to deal with, on a daily basis, with different denominations, people who thought very differently than me, different religions. And really, this piece from Rav Kook was a guiding light for me until today. So to understand what he's going to be talking about, his main question is, if you look at the bracha that we all just made when we lit the Chanukiah, the bracha is lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. I don't know about you, but tonight I lit 7 candles, right, including the shamish. But okay, the shamish doesn't count. But ultimately, I lit 7 candles. So why is it that we make a bracha lahadlik ner shel Chanukah on the singulars if we're only lighting 1 candle? Yes. So granted, we can answer the boring answer, which is still probably true, and that's the mitzvah itself. That the mitzvah, if you light 1 candle, so now you fulfill your mitzvah. But that's just the level of pshat. We need to get a little bit deeper. And what Cook ultimately draws up is extremely inspirational and a very, very important message for us. So I'm going to this first piece that I brought, I'm going to summarize it because you need to understand it in order to understand the first sentence of the piece I actually want to read, that he's discussing the name Chanukah. If you look at the name Chanukah, so it comes from the word of chinuch, education. But the big difference is that the word chinuch, chanoch, is a zachar word. It's a masculine word. And yet we refer to Chanukah as in the feminine form. So what's the difference? So in the Kabbalistic literature, or when the attribute of male is the mashpia, or the influencer, and the idea of the feminine is used as the receiver, right? Which is obviously based off of reproduction. So normally, what is chinuch? What am I doing when I'm trying to educate a generation, or when I'm trying to inaugurate something? It's that I'm going to prepare it for its ultimate purpose, what it is going to be. So I have a kid, and I'm bringing him to school. I'm going to educate this child in order how to be a proper citizen and individual and human being and part of society when he or she grows up. And therefore, I'm influencing what is going to be this child's future. However, by the Beit HaMikdash, which is it's all about the Chanukat HaBayit, the inauguration of the Beit HaMikdash, or the re-inauguration of the Beit HaMikdash that happened at the time of Chanukah, the miracle of Chanukah. What was happening is that in the Beit HaMikdash, all of the light, all of the values, everything that's going to be L'atid lavo in the future, in the times, whether you want to call it the Messianic times, or the time when when we daven for all the time we talk about Tehillim, or we daven for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, when the whole world's going to recognize Hashem, then those days, that light already exists in the Beit HaMikdash. It's just that we, the world, the people, we don't have the kelim, we don't have the ability to hold that light. Ultimately, we're going to get to that place. But we ourselves aren't ready for it yet, but it already exists there. And therefore, whenever we're dealing with the Beit HaMikdash, or especially when we're dealing with the inauguration of the Beit HaMikdash, the light of what's going to be in the future, the ideas, the values of what's ultimately going to be, already exists now. Okay, put that idea on the side, and that's what he starts with. In the second piece in Olat Riyah, Rav Kook says, HaChanukah mushpat me'atid hayoter na'aleh kasher mevu'ar behorat Chanukah. So this Chanukah, which is influenced from the future, meaning that it already exists now in its entirety, judging from the name Chanukah, which is in the feminine, behakbala lorat chanoch, right, as opposed to the normal language of chanoch, chinuch, which is the masculine. He mitzayeret et kol me'orot hapratim shetzrichim la'ir ba'uma. So the lights, and now instead of the word lights, we can also use the word values here. The values or the lights that are going to be in the future already exist in the Beit HaMikdash in its inauguration at the beginning. What are these lights that we're talking about? Are these values? Or HaTorah, the light of the Torah, or HaNevuah, the light of prophecy, or HaChochmah, the light of wisdom, or HaTzedek, the light of justice, or HaGvura, the light of Gvura, strength. There's obviously deeper ideas for Gvura, or HaSimcha, the light of happiness, or HaChesed, or Ahava, the light of love, and all those other values, all those values that we've been learning our entire lives that the Torah is filled with and is teaching us. All of those lights, all of them exist together in the Beit HaMikdash. שרק טרם הוכרה תכלית העליונה של החיים, נראים לנו האורות הרבים. הפרטיים כאילו הם דברים נפרדים. But even though they're all really one light, until we get to that point, until we're able to understand and really see that light, we view these lights as individual lights, as individual values that aren't necessarily connected. וצריכים לפעמים להיות עומדים בפירודם. And sometimes they need to be separate lights, separate values. כדי שלא תמחץ צורת כל אחד מהם על ידי עירוב פרשיות. In order that each light, each value doesn't take away or dim the other light. I'm gonna obviously explain this a little bit more, but this is an unbelievable idea. ולפעמים הפירודים מביאים גם כן סכסוכי דעות. And sometimes these divisions, these different values, these different lights actually bring to an argument, a difference of opinions. Because what happens? Each of us has a light. Each of us has a value that we hold more dear than any other value. For some people, that value is Torah. For some people, that value might be tefillah. For some people, that value might be chesed, going out, helping people. For other people, it might be tzedek, might be seeking justice. But each person has the value that for them is more important than any other value. Now, it's important to recognize that why is it that it works that way? Why is it that we need to view our own value as more important than other values? Because if I'm totally focused on one value, on one ideal, then I am going to develop that ideal to the maximum that it can be. If you try to be good at everything, you end up being mediocre at many things, but you do not excel at anything. So if you look at professions, if you look at doctors, if a doctor wants to specialize, they specialize on extremely specific areas, right? There's not just, I mean, being a cardiologist or being, let's say, a neurologist is already a specialty. But then there's a pediatric neurologist. And then there's a pediatric neurologist who specializes in a very specific syndrome or type of type of disorder, right? Then each one is an expert because they're able to really focus on that which they want to excel at. They are going to develop that field to be the highest level. And it's the same thing with our values. If somebody's working to be the best Talmid Chacham, to learn the most Torah, and is dedicating day and night to learning and learning, they are going to excel and be bigger Talmidei Chachamim at the end of the day because they're putting the effort into it. If somebody wants to be the best Baal Chesed, who wants to create an institution of Chesed that it's going to, be changing the world, and they're really putting all their strength into it, then they're going to create an organization of Chesed that is going to be paralleled by none. But if everybody's running around and trying to be everything, to be the best, the biggest Talmid Chacham and the best Chesed, and spend the most time davening and this and that, and also be the biggest entrepreneur and the biggest philanthropist and the biggest thought, it's not possible. You can't be the best at everything. And therefore, it's needed that we see these values as separate from each other in order that we can each focus on the value, the light that we want to develop for the sake of the world. But what ends up happening is that because we're each working on different values, it leads to fighting. It leads to issues. By the way, the bold is my bold, not Rav Kook's bold. יש נוטה לאחד המאורות ביותר, ונדמה לו שמי שנוטה לחברו, הוא ממעט צביונו של אותו המאור החביב עליו, ושהוא מכיר ביותר ביקרתו. And what ends up happening? I'm working on one value, but I see you're working on another value. So I'm going to say, hey, wait, whoa, you're disrespecting my value. You want to destroy my value. You want to be, take all the glory for your value, for your light. And the opposite, you're going to view me as a threat, so to speak, because I have a different value than you. And then it's almost this, it creates this unpleasant fight and really competition between us because we view each other as threats to our own, the specific value that we're trying to illuminate to the world. ומתוך שכל אחד מתנגד להגביר ולהדיר את הצד הטוב שנפשו נוטה אליו, הכלל מתפנה והשכלולים מתרבים. So again, here he's saying the positive element. But because we're each hyper-focused on our value, so we end up properly developing that value to a point where it's going to have a real impact and influence in the world. ומתוך שכל אחד מתקדר להגביר ולהדיר את הצד הטוב שנפשו, sorry, I just read that. Aval, sorry, hear the bold. Aval הפירודים גם כן לא יהיו קיימים לעד. But these divisions that we have, they're not going to be like that forever. שהרי כל זמן שיש פירודי דעות, אין הקדושה מתבססת בעולם. All the while that there is this division of opinions and thoughts, and the kedusha, the sanctity, cannot be based in the world. Meaning it's necessary for us each to grab onto our value and develop it as much as we can. But in the long run, ultimately, it can't always go on like that. They're always going to be fighting for our own specific values, because then we're not going to be able to get kedusha. V'ikara bracha hi birkat shalom, and the ultimate blessing is the bracha of shalom that's going to happen. V'hi titkayem ba'atid, and now we're getting back to the future, because this is what's going to happen ultimately in the future. B'hiyot ha'akara brura lakol, when it becomes clear to everybody. Ki kol ha'meorot ha'ti'im hakol hu ner echad. We're all going to recognize that all of these lights, these individual lights, are really just one big light. They're all connected. It's all the same thing. Okay, now he explains why the bracha is ner shel Chanukah in the singular, or ner Chanukah and not nerot Chanukah. Because, okay, lo nerot shel Chanukah ne'emar bebracha, shin nisua nosat dea, ad merchak yoter nisgav, ad atir yoter elyon v'ne'eratz be'oz Hashem, ki im ner shel Chanukah. Because in Chanukah, with the inauguration of Beit HaMikdash, when all the lights are there, all the values are there that's going to ultimately be in the future, even though we see as of now all these separate lights, but the bracha we make is on the singular, because there's a recognition that even though we see many lights, we see different values, there's a recognition that ultimately the day is going to come when we're going to recognize that all these lights are really just one light. They're all connected. It's the light of Hashem, the light of Kedusha, that we're ultimately meant to illuminate the world with. And why do I think this is so important? This idea is life-changing. Because everybody has a light. Everybody has a value behind their thought. And what happens is we get carried away, and we start, when we see somebody disagreeing with us, we feel threatened. We feel threatened, and it's a natural feeling, because again, we have my value. And my value is like this. So if I have somebody else with a different value, then I'm threatened, because I feel that they're trying to take away from my value. And then they might be threatened by me because I'm taking away from their value. But when we approach somebody, and this has happened many times, with a different opinion from a different political party, to understand, forget about, and this, no, you don't have to agree. And you don't have to compromise on your own value. But to stop for a second, say, hold on a second. What is the value? What is the ner behind that person? What's the ner behind their idea? And I've done this many times. And all of a sudden you start seeing, wait a minute, there's a value there that they are trying to produce. So I'm going to give you an almost an easy type of example, a little bit extreme. But let's say you have the socialist versus the capitalist argument, right? If you forget about all the details, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, what they think is the right thing, but if you look what's behind each of those opinions, right? One group, let's say the capitalists, they're looking for the right of the individual, which is something that's very important. And when you look at the socialists, and you look at the value, look at whether it's equality, right? Whether it's that, that there shouldn't be people who are elevated over other people, right? There's values there that are real values. Now, it could be that we disagree with one way or the other, or how it is, or maybe it's a mix, or whatever it is. I'm not at all trying to solve any problems here. Even it's just every big argument. If you look what's behind it, what's the idea? Now, the first argument to really do this, in my opinion, in terms of again, I'm not at all trying to. This isn't me picking sides or saying anything. It's just the pro-life versus pro-choice argument, right? So I'm not talking about abortion. I'm not getting into details, but the fact that they even label it, it's labeled pro-life and pro-choice. Both things are good. Both things are good. Once you already see that the other side has a value behind them, doesn't mean you have to agree. It still could be that you have to stand your ground and you have your reasons for your value and what you want to stand for. But you're not going to call them all these ugly names anymore. You're going to start to say, hold on a second. These are individuals. These are humans who have a value behind what they're saying. And what we're seeing now is just insults and there's no actual discourse. But if you stop for a second, say, hold on a second, there is a point there. It's also a smart individual. There's got to be something behind their idea they're representing. And once each person, each of the sides recognizes the value behind the other, that's when you can start having respect for each other. And that is when you can start creating a real dialogue. And I'll just say even a silly modern day example. In another week, we have the merit of Ona Shalosh, right? The third season of Shtisel, right? Much anticipated season of, and one of the things that I found fascinating, last year I was at APAC, right before Corona got bad. We didn't yet know what was going to happen. And they had some actors from Shtisel there was like a whole discussion. It was very, very interesting. And I've spoken to many people who have no concept of ultra-Orthodox life. They have no idea anything about the Haredim, except for negative stereotypes they've the news or whatever. And something about this show was able to break down all of the stereotypes because it presented them as people, as regular people with regular problems. Yes, before they ate, they made brachot. And, right? There are a lot of differences in their lifestyle, but at the end of the day, they showed them as regular people who have regular issues or are dealing with the same things that everybody else is. And once they were able to be seen as people, be able to see as people who have values, so then all of a sudden we can have a conversation. Does that mean that all my reform students started to grow payas or whatever? Probably not, right? but all of a sudden, hold on a second, maybe there's real people here we can have a discussion with. These are people who also have values and have beating hearts and have blood running through their veins that we can talk together and to create something and build with it. And so that's a strong message of Hanukkah that we have, is that we see many lights. And those lights, there are many values that are out there. But we recognize, we take a step back when we light the Hanukkah candle, say, even though I see many lights, tonight we saw 7 lights, I'm still going to say it in the singular because I recognize that all those lights really are one. And Bezrat Hashem, if we can take this message to heart and we can start talking this way with people, then Bezrat Hashem, very soon we will get to that point when we will all recognize that it's a ner shel Chanukah, not neirot shel Chanukah. Chanukah Sameach.
Amazing, powerful message. Thank you very much for Tzvi. Reminds me very quickly of another piece in Rav Kook, who speaks about the word lenatzeach, which we normally translate as to be victorious, to win. That's what we speak about many times during Hanukkah. We won the war. But Rav Kook comes up with an amazing explanation. A menatzeach, when you have an orchestra, then it's the conductor. He's also, in Hebrew, he's called the menatzeach over the orchestra. He says, Rav Kook, to win the battle does not mean that you defeat and demolish your enemy. On contrary, you realize that the other side is also has its own values, as you just spoke about beautifully, and therefore you're able to conduct all the different enemies or all the different parties that seem to be quarreling each other to one orchestra in a harmony, that each one plays his musical instrument in the right moment so that it sounds beautiful altogether, harmonious. So that's lenatzeach. That's what it really means. Include everyone in the orchestra with a harmonious sound. That's what it really means to win win the battle in the end. We're all included, and each one has their effect and their importance. Shkoyach Gadol, Ezrat Hashem.
רגע את המשפט, לא הספקתי לכתוב אותו. אני רוצה את המשפט הזה על שהאור העתידי כבר קיים. אפשר שנייה לראות את זה שוב על הסקרין?
כן, שנייה.
בינתיים, יישר כוח, רב צבי. So nice to hear from you. יישר כוח.
יישר כוח, חנוכה שמח, everyone.
חנוכה שמח. All too.